there. There we go. All right. Hello and welcome to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. I'm Les from Digital Creations, helping to bring the live stream to you tonight. Now, unfortunately, straight off the bat, we have some technical difficulties. We'll only be able to hear Paul and Brian tonight, unless obviously I can get things working while the show's going on. So let's have a look who's in the chat tonight. I've got to welcome everybody in the chat. Sky's doing the moderating tonight. Welcome to the show, Sky. So let's have a look. Chris Wright, we've got Stargazer Eternal, New Forest Explorer, welcome to the show. Stockholm Pearls and Views, Twitchy Curtains, Lisa Rod, Alison Buttle, welcome Alison. Lee Roscoe, welcome to the show, Lee. Tino, and great support tonight. I can say I know I've not called everybody's name out, but yeah, some more coming on. Great support, as I say. John Wright 76 is in the chat tonight. Rocky Nuisance, and I'll finish off with. Let's have a look. I don't think I've probably missed somebody out. Ralph, Crane in G. And he says, or she, or Refu Crane in G. Love this channel. So that's one of the good comments on there, and I'm sure people have got good comments to pass on tonight. As I say, problems with the video, audio should be okay. So we're going to go with the audio, and I've got to welcome Paul to welcome tonight's guest. Hang on in there. Just let me sort something out. I think you might be on air, Paul.
Right, thank you very much, Les. And could the people in the chat just indicate whether you can hear us? I did see the chat going up saying Les were a bit quiet, so he might want to just, if he addresses it later, address that one, please, Les, if possible. We still welcome some questions through the chat. Make sure that we get them to Les in block capitals, please. And I'd like to welcome tonight's guest, Brian Allan, editor of Phenomena magazine, prolific researcher, well, author of 14 books. I think that's got to tell you something. Brian, welcome to Truth Proof.
Hey, Paul, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on board. It's a genuine pleasure to be here, man. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I mean, you come with a wealth of knowledge, and I think you would be one of my go-to places if I wanted to run things past someone. Let's put it that way. And I'm sure that I'm not the only person that uses you for such things. If using is the word. So yeah, it's great. But Brian, let's go back a few years, or a lot of years, to early childhood, 2 to 4 years old, and tell us how this interest began.
Okay. My interest, although I didn't realise at the time, because I was only about 2.5, 3 years old when I had my first encounter. At first, up for the first 20, 30 years, I thought what I saw may have been paranormal in nature, but now I realise it wasn't. I think it was extraterrestrial, but I'll give you the story.
Yeah. I'm
2.5 years old. I'm lying in a cot. Okay, I can see the bars, because what happened now that I'm going to tell you about, I can remember. This is like 70 odd years ago, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. This is branded into my brain in letters of fire. I'm lying in the cot, and the blankets are over me. And I'm sort of looking out the cot. I've just woke up. The sun's streaming across the bottom of the cot, and right ahead of me is my father's baby grand piano. That was so big he couldn't get in the living room, so it went in the bedroom, because these things are big. But the thing is, I was used to seeing this every morning when I woke up. But the thing was, this morning when I woke up, between me and the piano, there was a figure standing. It was about 4 foot tall. It was dressed in a one-piece green jumpsuit thing, and around its waist, what I thought was a belt, and it wasn't a belt, because where the buckle should have been, it was a device of some kind. It was a machine. And it was standing with its arms folded, and it was watching me. And I'm lying there thinking, what the hell is this? What's this? And I open my eyes, close them, open my eyes, close them. And this thing wasn't going away. and I wasn't dreaming this. I swear to God, I was awake. This was no hallucination. This thing was standing there, and it was watching me. Well, I closed my eyes a couple of times, opened them again, and it was still there. Well, being a kid, because it wasn't threatening me or doing anything out of place, I went back to sleep again. And when I woke up, it had gone. So I told my mum and dad about it, and they said, nah, nothing. You imagined it. Okay, mum and dad, that was an end to it. The thing was, a few months later, in the same bedroom, although my cot had been moved a little bit, I had what can only be described as a lucid dream. Now, this is before Roswell. This is before flying saucers were assumed to be round disc-shaped things. I had this lucid dream, and if you'll probably know what I mean by lucid dream. Any of the audience that doesn't, forgive me if you do, but a lucid dream is when you know you're dreaming and you're in charge of that dream, and you can do literally anything you want to do. Because it's a dream, you can do it. Anyway, I was having this lucid dream, and I saw this UFO, and I suddenly knew, and it was like there right in front of me, and I was watching this thing, and I knew that it had come for me. It was for me. And it's not till, I guess, the last 20 years or so that I realized that the two were connected, that this thing that I saw was not supernatural in the case of being a fairy or an elf or whatever. This was an ET, and it was connected to that UFO somehow. And I think what this thing was doing was it was marking me. It was selecting me for some purpose. And since that encounter, I've done nothing. This has been my field. It's all I've ever wanted to be interested in, seriously, is the paranormal and ufology. And to be in all honesty, I see very little difference between the two of them.
No, I would agree. And it's an incredible story, and one that, like you said, you've retained. And it's as sharp as attacking you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Over 70 years later.
Yeah.
And how often, Brian, did you think about it growing up? I'm imagining quite a lot.
Occasionally, it would pop into my mind, but it wasn't a thing I obsessed over or anything. It just happened, and I just accepted it, and it's just been part of my life ever since. Really?
Yeah, but somewhat nurtured that interest in the paranormal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I saw then, it kept my interest going, and it fed the interest and ignited it, if you like. And I've had that interest ever since, literally ever since then.
So that one childhood encounter, were there any more during childhood?
Not during childhood. I've had odd occasions when, this sounds, I've heard voices, for want of a better word, and they've been talking to me, and I've been answering them. But, this only happened in very specific situations, and not very often at that. But I've had the odd encounter since then, but they've all been going in the same direction. They've all seemed to be very positive from my point of view, anyway.
That's good, and we kind of share a few things, or agree on a few things, quite unknowingly, because I know that you believe, or I hope you do, that most of this is linked. All aspects of the phenomena.
Absolutely.
There's a thread of everything running through them all.
It's I think I've described it. I think I've described it to you, Paul, as a spider's web.
Yeah.
Once you pick up one thread of this thing, you'll find that it will eventually go back to the core. There is a core that lies at the heart of it, and everything spreads out from there. Absolutely.
Right. Could be a sweeping question, this one. What do you think the core is? Do you think it's a hive mind?
A hive mind, well, it's hard to say. But I think it's very hard to define what the core is, because it's so multifaceted.
Yeah.
Because it covers every subject you can think of, and under the normal head of the paranormal or ufology, it's a vast subject. That's why I say it's a spider's web. But at the core there lies this call it a hive mind. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. A hive mind. Yeah, why not?
Okay.
That was it.
So, well, thank you for covering that, the early encounter. So we'll jump forward a lot of years, and probably it's something that's close to your heart, and you've done a lot of research on Rosslyn Chapel.
Oh, Rosslyn Chapel, yeah.
Be as detailed as you like, Brian.
Okay, I'll try it in the time we've got, because I know that there's a few subjects to cover. But Rosslyn Chapel, to be honest, I knew nothing about Rosslyn Chapel until the 1980s. And it's only been there for like 500, 600 years, hell, But I knew nothing about it till about the 1980s, till I read a book called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, quite a famous book. And books since then mentioned the chapel. So I guess it would be the early 1990s that I first paid a visit there with my wife. And we went in, and at the time, it was no big deal. It wasn't like the sort of fancy, the entry hall, the cafe, the bookshop, the whole thing. Where it's quite a performance now. And there's a room where you can sit and you can get a preview, a video preview of the chapel and all the rest of it. Then you go. Before then, it was just like a hut. You paid your money, you went in, you came back out again. End of. But the place was quite amazing because inside, anyone that's never been in Rosslyn Chapel cannot understand how detailed that place is in terms of the carvings that are in it. There's stuff in there that just you wouldn't believe the intricacy of the carvings. But the thing was, it was in a very bad state of repair because the roof leaked. It was still a functioning church, I might add, because it's not as a church. It's not Rosslyn Chapel. It's the Collegiate Church of St Matthew, is its proper name, as you probably know. But there was like green lichen growing on the walls. It was in a pretty poor state. So I think the people who owned the chapel realised that because of the book and because of the publicity it was getting, they decided that they would need to do something about this. So they set up the Rosslyn Trustees. They got a lot of money together and they put a roof, a cover, a cover over the roof to try and dry the place out. That was the important thing. So we didn't sort of come back in there. We went back with some mediums. Yeah, there was my wife, myself, and there was 4 mediums in point of fact we went back with. That being the mid 1990s. And the place was a lot cleaner then, a lot better. They were starting to get it looking more than it should have been. And it was during that first expedition, for want of a better word, because that was when I still ghost busted. I still went out ghost busting. I stopped. I gave that up. I said, nah, no more, because I'd seen enough, and I knew it was a fact, so I just left it at that. Because other than that, I was just getting. I'm not being lying. It was getting boring after a while. It was the same thing. Anyway, I went back. We went to the chapel that day with the 4 mediums, and my wife took 2 of them round, and I took 2 of them round. They'd never been none of them had been in the chapel before, and they didn't know each other. It was like 2 man and wife teams, husband and wife teams. And the thing they were all united about was the fact that in Rosslyn Chapel, at the east end of the chapel, there is what they call the Lady Chapel or the retro choir. Okay, and in this retro choir there are 4 small altars set up against the wall. It's not the main altar of the church itself, but there's the small altars set up against the wall. There are 3 of them at ground level, and one on the right, which is above the steps going down at the crypt. They call it the high altar quite logically because it's high up in the air. You couldn't actually get it. It's too high up, and there isn't any way of getting at it. But the 3 altars at the back of the chapel, the one on the left-hand side is the St Matthew altar. And both sets of mediums, when they got to this, they went, oh, what's happening here? And they suddenly realised that the St Matthew altar was what they called an astral doorway. Okay? Now, I sort of latched onto this, and I thought, well, astral doorway, well, I'll have some of this. So I went and stood with my back against the altar, and the back of, I guess, in height, halfway across my shoulder blades. That's about the height of this altar, and it's only about 8 inches deep. It's not a big thing. Well, I stood there, and my arms started to float up from my sides, literally floated up from my sides. And I thought, whoa, hey, what's something going on here? So I then felt it was almost like that there was like hydraulic jacks under my feet was lifting me off the floor, and I was starting to lift off the floor. It was very, very strange, and there was this strange sense of latent power in there. So I stumbled forward. My wife had been videoing all this, so I said, "Look," I said, "Go stand where I've been standing." So I didn't tell her anything, and my wife went and stood there with her back to the altar, and all of a sudden her hands started to float up from the sides, as if they were getting lifted up. There was like something coming up from the floor. And that's when I realised that there was immense power here. So we left it at that, and we went down into the crypt. And we suddenly realised that there is a nexus of ley lines runs through the chapel, and the focal point of them is in the crypt. If you go down the stairs into the crypt, on the left-hand wall, there's a little doorway, and that is where they used to keep the drawings of the stuff and tools when they were actually building the place. It's still there. And in fact, on the walls, engraved into the walls, there are arcs and shapes and different designs. This was all done when the chapel was being built. But just as you walk into this little room and turn to your right, this is where the ley lines cross. And the people that were with me, the woman that was with us said, "Close your eyes." And it felt like I was standing on the deck of a ship and it was heaving underneath me. It was like standing in a rubber mat, and there was stuff going on under your feet. And of course, it was just a stone slab. And she said, "What did you feel?" And I told her, "Yeah." She said, "That's where the ley lines are." Anyway, we came out of there and we went home, and that was an end to it. But I started thinking about all this because I'd had a good look at this lady chapel, and in the roof for the lady, in the ceiling of the lady chapel, there are arcs of stone cubes running up. There's like four at each altar, and they're all running up into the roof. And each arc contains a cube, and each cube has engraved faces, carved faces. And it suddenly occurred to us, what if these are music? What if these represent some sort of music? Because they're all coming from like little stone instruments played by stone angels that are as part of the carvings. Now, it occurred to me, I came across a concept called a Chladni pattern. That's Chladni, Chladni pattern. And this was a guy, he's actually been termed as the father of modern acoustics. I think it's called cymatics now is the term.
Yeah.
But at the time that these were created, because don't forget there's nothing in that chapel by chance, because Sir William Sinclair, who had the place built, he inspected literally everything was made out of wood before it was carved in stone and installed in the chapel. So at the time, to make these patterns, what they would had to have done is do what Chladni did, which was a thin metal plate or a piece of glass, which is clamped at one corner. They would sprinkle very fine sand on it, then use a bow, like an instrument bow. They'd create a musical note, and according to the musical note created, the sand would take up a pattern. And it appears, because they've actually done this, they've tried it, they've actually tried doing it, and it works. It still works. So each of these, if you like, designs, each of these carvings represented a musical note. So the puzzle was, what musical note do they represent? Now, and I'm being honest about this, we found out, and it was by sheer luck. Nothing else, sheer fluke. Or hell, maybe not. Maybe not. You never know what maybe not. Maybe not. But it was a guy called Bill Downey who was working with me at the time. Bill was a musician. And he came up with the concept of what is called the devil's chord. Now, the devil's chord is not an unknown concept, because this in medieval times, the Catholic Church decided that this devil's chord was too dangerous, because what was happening was that when this note, it's actually an augmented fourth in point of fact, it's a musical interval that is. When this augmented fourth note was being played in churches, people, depending on the design of the church, and it was very specific about this, the design and dimensions of the church, people were actually in effect tripping out. They were actually having their own divine experience. Now, the church wouldn't have this. It couldn't have this, because it would be the arbiter of who would or would not have a divine experience. So it banned it. It banned this musical note in all church music in the Middle Ages. That obviously changed, but the devil's chord that we worked out was F sharp, C, and A. But it's not the musical notes, it's the frequencies that are involved with this. Now, F sharp is 370 hertz, C is 523 hertz, and A is 880 hertz. And when they're combined, they make a chord. Now, the DVD, I've shown you earlier, I've got a DVD here, which contains that note. It contains what are called the gematria equivalents, which are 373, 515, and 888 hertz in turn. Then we came to what was called the solfeggio frequencies. Now, the solfeggio frequencies the church thoroughly approved of, because they occur in Gregorian chants. And I sometimes listen to Gregorian chants to relax, because I think they're very relaxing to listen to.
Yeah.
Now, the solfeggio frequencies range from 396 hertz to 852 hertz. Now, we didn't get a chance to use these, because when we returned in 2006 with a laptop with us, with the frequencies programmed into it, especially the devil's chord, and we also, as it happened, had a guy there who is an acoustic therapist, which was quite handy as it goes. Okay.
Did they let you in with the laptop, Brian?
Yeah. They won't get that now without specific permission. They just won't have it. Will not let you do it. As many film crews have found out to their cost, but that's another story. But so what we did, we went in, we set up the laptop, and we started creating the devil's chord, the F sharp, C, and A chord. Now, while this was going on, the acoustic therapist went down to the crypt and he started toning down in the crypt on his own. And he had no idea what happened then because he couldn't hear it. But so what we had was the tone coming from, oops, we had the tone, my image has just come up. I don't know if that's, oh, okay. We had the tone coming from the laptop, and we had the tone coming from the guy down the stairs, and we're sort of standing looking at each other up in the lady chapel, looking at us saying, well, that's nice, that's clever, well, that's nice. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the chapel created another tone entirely on its own. Based on our two chords, another one kicked off. It wasn't quite the same volume as other two. It was there and we could all hear it.
But this is created by the chapel. By the chapel,
on its own. Then a few seconds later, a fourth tone kicked off. So the chapel was then creating two harmonics based on what we were actually generating and the guy down the stairs. And we sort of looked at each other because this was, wow, what's going on? We didn't know why this was happening, but it must be a function of the chapel. Now, the guy downstairs, he knew nothing about this, and he stopped toning, and the other two tones, click, click, just stopped. And all we were left with was a single tone coming from the laptop. Now, by this time, one of the mediums went across and stood where I had originally stood on the St. Matthew altar with a back up against it. Oh my God, she said, whoa, what's happening here? So I said, what do you mean? So I went over and stood maybe at 2 or 3 feet facing her. And where we were standing went intensely cold. I mean, bitter, freezing North Country, bitter cold. This was North Pole stuff. And you could put your arms out from your sides, and it was like passing through a barrier. It was slightly warmer than outside. You brought your hands back in again. You could feel them getting colder and colder, and you were back in. So there was something happening at this altar, and this was where they said the astral doorway was. Now, don't forget that one of the legends associated with the chapel is that the physical gateway to heaven exists within this chapel somewhere. And that might have been a reference to this astral doorway, or this portal, if you want to put it that way. Now, it's my belief that Sir William Sinclair created this as a hiding place for, inverted commas, something. We don't know what. I haven't a clue what he hid there, but he knew what he was doing when he built that place, because when we went there initially with the mediums in the 1990s, they said this is not a building, it's a spiritual machine. It's a device of some kind, and it's designed to do something. And they themselves thought it was something to do with this astral doorway. So as far as we're concerned, Sir William Sinclair hid something in the chapel. He hid it on the other side of this doorway, but he left the key marked out and the frequencies represented by the cubes. So I think if we were left to experiment further, and the chapel won't hear of it, they just will not let you do it. Simple as that. It's different if you're making a thing like the Da Vinci Code, and you can afford loads of money to spend at them and look all legitimate and all. No, they'll let you come in and you can build scenery and all the rest of it, because my wife and I were actually in the chapel at the time when they were building the scenery down in the crypt, because it looks nothing, what you see in the cinema is nothing like what was down in the crypt. But we were actually there when the carpenters came in to build that. So Rosslyn Chapel is a spiritual machine. Although it's used as a chapel, it's used as a church, and there's church services there every week. You can get married in it if you want. If that's be your desire, you can do that as well. But Rosslyn Chapel is a spiritual machine. It's not just a building.
That is really interesting, and I should imagine you're one of the few people in the world that's ever done any kind of experimentation in Rosslyn Chapel.
Oh, like I can tell you something else about that. The second time over there with the laptop and all, I had my camera. It wasn't a video camera. It was just an ordinary digital flash camera, ordinary camera. And I had my back to the altar, and one of the mediums said something's happening on the altar, and I turned around and pushed the shutter release. It wasn't on flash. It was just the camera. And when I looked at the image, what it had picked up was on the actual front of the altar of this St. Matthew altar is the engraved cross of the Sinclair family. And again, you can Google all this. This is all Googleable. If they want to have a look at it, you can actually see this online. Now, this engraved cross was illuminated. There was a light shining on it. It didn't come from the camera because there was no flash on, and because the flash wouldn't have done that. It illuminated the whole altar, not just that tiny little bit in the middle. And it wasn't coming from a torch or a flashlight, because the flashlight would have been too diffuse. It would illuminate the whole front. Now, there was something illuminating that Whether it was self-illuminating, I don't know, but I've actually got that image and I use it in one of my presentations to show people what I actually saw there. So that chapel is a very special place indeed, very special.
Absolutely. We've got connections to it with my family, and my dad's sister years and years ago, because I've never been, but they live in Scotland. They're still up there. And before I knew about our connections to it, she said, "Oh, one of the only places that's," her words were, gives me the heebie-jeebies, Rosslyn Chapel." She says, "Oh, you go in there and you get a shiver."
Yeah.
It's one of those places. Just before we leave Rosslyn Chapel, you said that your arms lifted up.
Yeah.
And what do you attribute that to? Are we talking about, in your mind, something spiritual or something other?
I think other is the best way. It wasn't spiritual. There was a force coming up from the floor, and it tried to lift me, but my arms were easier. My arms came up, and I literally felt my heels getting pushed up from the floor. So something was coming up there. That is when we realised that there was something very special there. And that's when I realised also that this astral doorway is in fact a portal, and that portal can be activated by specific frequencies.
Then do you think the reason that they probably wouldn't let you back in there is because if you did discover something, it would be adverse to what the people who've got a vested interest in Rosslyn are all about?
Absolutely, because it would, from their point of view, it would bring the wrong type of person there.
Yeah.
Because trust me, they get all sorts of people trying to hold meetings in there. Like everything from covens of witches to sorcerers, all sorts of stuff. It's all sorts of strange ideas, and they just won't have it. They just will not. So they just won't let anybody in. In fact, I phoned up to ask if they'd let me do it, and they said, "Well, you need to speak to the trustees." And I just couldn't be asked. No, I just said no. Leave it.
Yeah.
No.
I can quite believe it.
Yeah.
You'd have got the knockback anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Without a doubt. So, just jumping from Rosslyn then, and Brian, I keep to stress that Brian's written a book on Rosslyn. Is it Between Two Worlds?
Rosslyn Between Two Worlds, it's called, yeah.
Yeah, because I know you've not got 2 hours tonight, Brian, to spend. But before you go, we'll do this right at the end. But I'd love you to tell the listeners where they can obtain your work, and everything. But yeah, so who do you think has made any substantial inroads into solving what we're all looking into, this enigma, UFOs, everything, the combination?
Well, as far as individuals go, I think I'm not going to name names because it gets too difficult then, but I think anyone who approaches the subject in a sane, rational manner is equally entitled to claim that they've made their contribution to trying to solve this problem. My own contribution is pretty minor, but nevertheless, I have tried. I have tried to make my contribution and make it available to the general public, basically, and in the books that I've written. But again, that's entirely, that's a subjective view, obviously, because I wrote the books. But
there's a vast volume of work gone into it. So
sugar, yes, absolutely. Colin Wilson, I used to think that Colin Wilson's books were extremely valuable. The guy's he's gone now, he's dead and gone. But Colin Wilson I found immensely readable and immensely open-minded about this whole subject. Yeah. So if anybody wants to look up the books that Colin Wilson's written on the subject of the paranormal, they'll find an immense wealth of information in there.
Right.
There's all sorts of people have written about it.
I'll not press Les for any questions yet, but I have got one that was sent to me earlier today, and it's from Pat Adams Wright, and Pat's a medium. And she just wanted me to ask you this. I don't know what your views will be, but she says, as a medium, she says, I've received messages from what she would term as strangers, people she doesn't know, and which she claims have been verified by historians. That's as much detail as I've got. She said, what does Brian, or who does Brian think are giving me those messages? Is it spirits? Is it something other? What's your views?
This gets into a very convoluted subject of what happens after you pass on. I'm pretty sure that your consciousness does not die with the body, because I don't think consciousness resides within the skull. I think consciousness resides outside the skull somewhere, and your skull is only the receiving medium for it, your brain. Okay, so I think that when you pass on, your consciousness just dissipates into the universe again, but as a discrete entity, as a lump, as a piece of information, if you like, as a consciousness unit, if you like. And I think everybody, I mean, consciousness, because it's not a physical unit, because it's non-physical, it doesn't matter how many consciousnesses that are out there, then every one of them is valid, and I'm pretty sure that they can and do communicate with people who are sensitive enough, like your medium friend just mentioned. But yeah, that's absolutely valid. But why they should pick her is simply because she happened to be there at the time, and she was open and willing to accept it, I guess.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm sure she'll appreciate that answer. I'm just looking at chat as well. Have we got a picture now, guys? I don't know whether it's just me and Brian talking in the outer nowhere, but it's all good. I'll just like to move on then. Tell us about the prison graveyard case, please, or a little bit about it.
Okay. Actually, I wrote about this as one of the chapters in my book, which is called Plague Ghosts. Now, there have been various plagues. COVID-19 was the last plague, if you like to put it that way, apart from the bubonic plague and stuff. But the prison graveyard, we're talking about the Covenanters prison, which is in Edinburgh, specifically in Greyfriars Churchyard. It's where they incarcerated hundreds of poor sods, these Covenanters that weren't too happy about accepting the English view of how the church should operate, the Episcopalian view. They preferred the rather stricter, humourless, if you like, Scottish version of it. Well, yeah, go on then, come on. And so they signed the solemn pledge and covenant, whereby they were only going to accept their view of what religion should be and how the gospel should be printed, it should be preached. The result of this was they displeased the authorities greatly, and those that couldn't kill out of hand, they banged up in this Covenanters prison. This is a long story, very short, of course, obviously.
Yeah, that's good.
But you had this guy, Bloody Mackenzie, George Mackenzie by name, who a noted hanging judge, who took great delight in consigning the Covenanters to the gallows. But while they were actually being held prior to the trial, as such it was, they were held within the confines of this Covenanters prison, which is not a prison, it's not a building, it's a strip of ground with mausoleums on both sides of it. It's about 100 metres long, it's about 10 metres wide. Some of the mausoleums are open to the air, some have roofs on, some have got gates on. Now, the City of the Dead Tours owns the rights to this place, and they take people in there and scare the bejesus out of them, quite frankly. And one of the attendees in one of these tours was attacked, knocked to the ground, got scratches and all the rest of it. And they said a poltergeist. Well, this has been attributed to what they call the Mackenzie poltergeist, because George Mackenzie's tomb is to the left-hand side of the gates into the Covenanters prison, and it's quite an elaborate affair, quite a spooky-looking place. And if you look through the grating in the door, you can actually see the gratings in the ground which lead down to his tomb. Now, apparently, this place used to be open, and in a good few decades ago, drunks came in, and it was bucket and rain, and they decided to take shelter in Mackenzie's tomb. So one of them, they climbed downstairs, and they got onto what looked like a floor. Well, they fell through the floor and ended up in a bunch of skulls. Okay, there were skulls down there as well. So they left the place a lot quicker than they came into it, as you could well imagine. But there was a lot of problems started at that point, and they were getting stuff going on. And they attributed this to the wrath of Mackenzie, his rest being disturbed, if you like, by these people. And since then, these attacks, and apparently there's been more than one attack, but the best one was this woman that got attacked, scratched, and pushed to the ground, and all the rest of it. And they attributed this to Bloody Mackenzie.
So are you going back, what, 20 years, 30 years, Brian? What?
Oh yeah, about 20, 30 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and is it still said to be active?
As far as I can make out, it is, because the mediums, well, okay. couple of the mediums we took up there once, we were in the Covenanters prison, right down at the bottom end of it. Now, this gives you an idea of what you're dealing with here. Because I had a tri-field meter with me at the time, you know, the tri-field.
Yeah.
And
right, well, this is the question we were going to get to anyway. Is this the jumping off the fence moment?
No.
No,
Absolutely not. No,
No,
that was after that.
right.
This moment, what happened was we were standing talking with each other, and I had the tri-field in one hand, and we were just talking. And the medium said, "Oh, there's a spirit just past us," and the tri-field went vroom, vroom, up and down. I went, "Ooh!" And I said, "Was that just a fluke?" Then she said, "Oh, there's another spirit, zoom, zoom, up and down with the meter." So, was she interpreting a random magnetic field that just happened to be on the path as a spirit, or was the spirit generating the magnetic field? I have no idea. I don't know. But it seems to tie into the whole nature of electromagnetism and how it is essential for every function that we have in our life. Even down to cells, the cellulars, even down to a cellular level, electromagnetism is in there somewhere. But as to why that, I don't know. I just don't know. All I know is she said that the spirit passed and the meter reacted to it. Because I also saw there's two mediums the same day this was. Again, they said put the meter down on that piece of stone, that stone. And I did, and it was on the stone wall, low stone wall. And they put their hands over one another. They were about 18 inches above the meter, and they concentrated. Up went the meter. They took their hands away. Down went the meter. Put their hands above it again, up, down. So they were having a direct effect on that tri-field meter. Why? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. But all I can do is recount what happened.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously attributed it to spirit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're that open-minded, which is brilliant. That you're saying, well, it could have been, but was it something else? Was it something else?
Was it a random, again, as I say, a random magnetic field that was getting generated, that was passing through, and the meter was reacting to that? But why it should only happen at specific moments?
Well, that's right. It's a bit more than random, really, isn't it? You know, it's happening at the specific moment.
A specific moment, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, I mean, we could, if you don't mind, we could move on from that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've got it now, haven't we? The jumping off the fence moment. Is it the Highgate Hotel?
No, it's the Highland Hotel.
Hotel. Sorry.
So Highland Hotel. What I can tell you is this is one of the most abundantly haunted buildings I have ever been in, and it still is, I might add. Because they still get ghost hunters going up there, and they're still getting stuff happening. But we went up there in a request that was from the then owner. I'll call her Patricia. It's not her name, but we'll call her Patricia. She was getting stuff happening in the hotel. I mean, it's not a big place. It's in a little village called Doune, Doune, which is in Stirlingshire. It's about maybe half an hour's drive from where I live. So I went across, and there was me, there was a medium, and I think, no, just me and the medium, that was it. And we went across. So we went in and we spoke to the woman. And she was hearing her name called. There was doors opening and closing. There was all sorts of stuff happening in the hotel, but especially on this flight of stairs that led up to her, if you like, their quarters from the hotel itself, you know. And but before this actually happened, we were sitting talking to her. It was a winter's night, or it was either early spring or late autumn, one of them. But it was a cold and it was dark, and we were sitting in our office. There was two settees. There was a desk, two settees, and and a couple of armchairs. And I was sitting on one side of the fire. She was sitting on another, and her brother was sitting immediately on my left-hand side. And she was explaining what happened. What was happening in the hotel, and over her left shoulder, I saw to my alarm a figure was starting to form. It was about 7 or 8 foot high. His head was about on the roof. It was just at the top of the window, put it that way, and it was big, and it was dark, and it was starting to form, and it was getting more and more dense. So I thought, and at the same time, the room temperature just dropped like a stone, kaboom, down went the temperature. And the sound quality altered. It was an echoey, strange sound quality. And I'm starting to think, I don't like this because I'm not in control of this. So I sent out mentally, I said, I don't want this to happen. I don't want to see this. Please go away. Just go away. And it went like that. Well, it faded and went all of a sudden, bang. The temperature came back up and the sound quality went back to normal again. So I said to the guy next to me, I said, our brother said, did you sense anything just now? Yeah, he says, the temperature went down. I said, well, I thought, so it wasn't just me. But he didn't see anything and he didn't hear anything, put it that way. So, but he sensed the temperature went down. So at least, so I knew that something was wrong with that hotel. Well, it turns out that the ghost, or if you like, the main ghost, was of a young girl who had got pregnant. Okay, now, this was back in the 1800s, 1780s, 1800s. I mean, it's an old place. It's an old little village. And so is this building. In fact, it used to be houses, but they were all knocked into one, and it became this Highland Hotel. And she'd had an abortion because her father didn't want her to have this baby and shame the family, you see. So she'd had an abortion, and she hated her father with a passion. Now, she'd fallen down the stairs and killed her. She'd killed her. She didn't commit suicide. She'd fallen down the stairs and died, you know. And she wasn't going to leave this staircase until she was reunited with the baby, with the spirit of her baby. So I'm standing on the stairs with the medium, and the medium's husband standing at the top of the stairs. And we're sort of discussing what we're going to do about this. Then all of a sudden, a wind started to blow. And it was a wind that would ruffle your hair. And every bit of exposed skin on my body, my face, and it started to tingle like 1,000 tiny needles were getting stuck in it. And I thought, whoa, I don't like this, you know, this. And I said, the medium looked at me, she said, if she was more powerful, she'd push us off this staircase if she could. So she said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reunite her with the dead baby, with the spirit of the dead baby. She says, you'll experience some stuff. So she went to the bottom of the stairs, her husband's at the top and I'm in the middle, and this wind is still blowing down the staircase. So I'm like experiencing all this. Then all of a sudden I could smell, how can I put this, a farmyard smell, not a bad smell, just like hay, horses, hot, you know, this sort of thing going on. And I could hear horses and somewhere going on in the background of this. Then all of a sudden it stopped.
Yeah. And
before she even said, I've reunited her with the baby, I knew that had happened because the temperature all came back up again. Everything was fine. Everything just went calm. Everything went calm. So as far as we'd concerned, we'd knocked it off. We'd done what we'd come to do, and we just left it at that. But as far as I can make out, there was other stuff. Well, that was the same hotel where I was told where there was the spirit of a dead dog, believe it or not. And that was a strange one because it was about knee height. Put your hand down, and it was like a tingling sensation when you put your hand into this area. This was the spirit of the dog, apparently. And there was another couple of spirits in the place, but they were no harm to anyone. So the medium said, just leave them. Just leave them alone, and that'll be fine. So we did, and I came home, but that was the first time I realised, watch what you're doing. So if there's anybody interested in ghost hunting or thinking of starting it up, be very, very careful what you're doing because you can attract these things. These things can attract them, can attach themselves to you, and they can come home with you. Because one came home with me that night, okay? Because the following evening, I noticed I came in. I'd been out working, and I came in, walked into the living room, and just in front of where the chair where my wife sits, there was I'd put the diameter about the size of a 45-gallon drum. No, smaller, rather smaller than a 45-gallon. A column, if you like, still went up to the floor. And you could walk into it and walk out of it again. It was a stench. It was a foul, evil stench walk. You could walk through, and I went, oh no, because I knew what had happened. This thing had picked up, and it was manifesting as an evil smell. My wife noticed it as well. And she said, well, what's happened? I said, oh, I don't know. It'll be fine. It'll be the drains or something. It'll clear. So that night, this has lasted for the day, and it was still there the following day. So the following night, my wife went out, and I went up to the kitchen and looked right down the length of the living room. I said, right, I know you don't mean us any harm, but says you're going to alarm my wife, you're going to alarm my children, and you're going to alarm me. So I said, I'd appreciate if you left now. Please go now. And like putting the switch off, click. It went.
It finished.
It went. It just finished as quick as that. It didn't have to.
No.
But it went.
It's fascinating, Brian. And do you know, you kind of touched when you're talking about yourself and your involvement with the spirit mediums. When we pass over, the thinking process is here. It's in the matter, in our brains. We form thoughts. How come then? Well, I'm not asking because I know. Why are spirit able to think and form thoughts and have and work with intent and purpose when there's no actual physical brain? Is it in the cloud? Is it the spirit form of the
It's
cloud?
in the cloud, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, consciousness is not physical. Consciousness is a series of electrical interactions.
Yeah, yes, Brian. But if we're on a physical level, I need this brain, you do, and the people in the chat to form thoughts and speak.
Yeah.
But when we've gone, that's not there anymore. I'm not challenging you here, Brian. I'm just I'm trying to get my head around it myself. So how come the spirit's able to do this, in your opinion?
Because the spirit's consciousness probably came from a human being anyway. Well, but I'm going to be very careful what I say because this gets into a whole other area.
Yeah.
And but I'm pretty sure that spirit consciousness was originally in a human form anyway. So because when we move over, we become spirit. Our consciousness just shifts elsewhere. So I'm pretty sure that's how they can communicate if they so wish, because the consciousness remains and it is still sentient. It still thinks, if you like, and it's still aware at some level at least.
Thank you. Yeah, that's brilliant. Shall we see whether Les has got any questions for us, Brian? I know that you're tight for time tonight, aren't you?
Well, I can give you till 1:15, put it that way.
Excellent, thank you.
Brilliant. And going by the chat tonight, guys, excellent show so far. And thank you very much for coming on tonight, Brian. I've got some questions, and one of the questions is from Patricia Adams writes, Brian, have you ever visited a place where you've just detected just negative energy?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. In a cemetery once, but that's a whole different story. I mean, I don't have time to go into that one. That's involved. But yeah, have encountered negative energy? Absolutely. You can tell it straight away.
Yeah, I've got a question from Tony Worrell. What road does Brian believe has the most strange activity? Is it something like the A75 or another road?
I've looked at this. I'm well aware that roads, in fact, any given area can have spirit attached to it. But as far as roads are concerned, I can't give you an answer to that because I haven't really studied it closely enough. I mean, the subject is so vast. There's so many, literally, I'm punning here, but roads you can go down. But I just don't know. I mean, there's no point in me saying this because I haven't looked at the subject. But the A75, yeah, that's one I've heard of.
Yeah, and I guess I mean I don't know myself, Brian, but do you think some of these roads are old Roman roads?
I don't think it actually matters. I think it's to do with. I think it's more to do with the geology of the area rather than the road itself, because that is that's a Bonnybridge link question, if you like, because it's the geology of Bonnybridge that caused all the sightings there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've got a question from Lee Roscoe. Hi, Brian. Do you think if you can find the right note, going back to the musical note, you can lift anything in theory in weight? And he's saying thanks so much for your time tonight. Very interesting indeed.
Well, okay. I know where he's coming from. This is a Tibetan monk thing when they were lifting rock blocks up the stone face and they were projecting sound towards it. I've also seen this as being a possible method for shifting the blocks of stone that built the pyramids. Was done using sound or frequency or vibration of some sort. But as to whether there's a physical limit on what can be lifted, you could ask the same question for poltergeists, because poltergeist phenomenon involves lifting stuff and stuff physically, kinetic energy is getting generated. But I don't think that there's an unlimited weight that a poltergeist can lift, because I've never heard of a poltergeist lifting an express train or literally. There has to be a limit somewhere, but I'm pretty sure that sound frequency can and does and is used in point of fact for lifting things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Patricia Adams has got another question in tonight, and she's saying, what does Brian think about the peed off spirit being called a demon?
The what spirit?
The pissed off.
Oh, the pissed off. Okay, yeah,
pissed off.
Being called a demon.
yeah. I got that.
Yeah.
The irritated spirit, shall we say?
Yeah.
Okay. Demons. No. I know a guy. He lives in Michigan. His name is Joe Stewart. Google the guy. The guy is a demon hunter, and he travels around the United States of America, all over the place, clearing houses from demons, or evicting them, shall we say. But it depends what you think a demon actually is. Because although Dave, I've no doubt that Joe is shifting something. Now, he calls them demons, and he's been attacked by them and all the rest of it. And I've got his book. He kindly sent me quite a hefty big book on the subject. Interesting book. But it depends on what you think a demon actually is. Is a pissed off spirit a demon? Is a poltergeist a pissed off spirit? Who knows? Yeah. I mean, although I've been involved in this subject for the past, 60 odd years, nearly 70 years. In fact, more than, 70 odd years, let's call it. I've been involved in the subject. I don't have all the answers. No one does. And anyone that sits here and tells you that they know, they don't. Because if they tell you that they don't, I'd love to hear what they've got to say about certain subjects, because I'll guarantee I can shoot them down in flames. But I've no wish to do so, because I've been down these roads myself so many times. But is a pissed off spirit as a demon? I don't know. I honest to God don't know. I'm sorry, I can't help you. I just don't know.
Thanks for that, Brian. Wayne Higman is asking, Brian, do you think that buildings record negative energy, i.e. in the brickwork and foundations?
The old stone tape. There was an excellent film, quite an alarming supernatural film on the BBC a number of years ago, and it was called The Stone Tape, The Stone Tapes. I tell you what, it really stood the hair up on my head anyway. Quite a really frightening thing, especially the end sequence. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that stone, especially sandstone, can in fact record images, and granite, I might add. I think they're the two best ones at it. But yes, I'm pretty sure that they can pick up images, and they can record them rather like a tape, and they can be replayed to certain people, specific people who are sensitive enough to receive them. So yeah, I believe that. Do
you think then, Brian, before he gets to another question, do you think that for this to be played, as you just said, it needs the right combination, then it needs the certain people there to activate it?
Yes, I do believe that, and possibly even if I don't think a dry atmosphere would actually be conducive to this. I think a damp atmosphere, probably more conducive, more conductive, I would think, might help it to operate.
Thank you.
And my last question on the board here is from Smile a While, and the question is, if you see something in your house in the same place over and over, and it doesn't seem to bother anything or interact with you, should you speak to it or leave it alone?
It depends how brave you are, I think. But I would tend to see if it would interact with you, because because it won't harm you. It certainly won't harm you, because it's not able to harm you. I've never heard of a poltergeist physically attacking anyone, or knocking them down or killing them. It wouldn't happen. But if you think you're brave enough, by all means, just say hello. Can I help you? Is there anything I can do for you? Be polite, be open, and be empathic. I think, if you're going to do that, I won't do any harm.
It's interesting, Brian, what you said about stood on the stairs, and you said the spirit would push you down the stairs if it was strong enough. A few weeks ago, I met up with a medium. I didn't realise this guy was a medium, and I'll not go into the story because I did it last week. But he told me that there was some kind of entity on the cliff tops, and he said if it was strong enough, it would push you over the cliffs. Yeah. Not just me either. That's would be its intent. Sure. So like you said, it's not strong enough, but fascinating. I don't know, to play with them thoughts. Yeah. But if Les is done with questions for the moment, then is that it, Les?
Yes, that's all the questions I got me board.
Okay,
so thanks for that, Brian.
We'll just jump straight in because I know we're limited for time here. Why Bonnie Bridge?
Why Bonnie Bridge? Right. The Bonnie Bridge enigma, let's call it the Bonnie Bridge enigma, started in 1992-93 when a guy called Walker, was driving between the towns of Falkirk and the village of Bonnybridge. He saw this thing like a star, a glowing orb in the middle of the road. He stopped his car. The orb took off at a rate of knots, gone, and so did he in the opposite direction to get away out the road. I don't blame him. And the media picked up on this, and it picked up momentum. So the whole Bonnie Bridge enigma was a media-driven phenomenon. But because of that, people started looking.
Yeah.
And they started seeing things. Some of them were aircraft, some of them were meteorites, some of them were natural aerial, if you like, atmospheric phenomena. But other than them, yeah, I'm pretty sure there was unidentified flying objects, UFOs, extraterrestrial craft, whatever you want to call them. They were seen, absolutely. And people would say, well, why Bonnie Bridge? And the glib answer that came back was, well, why not? And that's fair enough, but that's not an answer, it's an evasion. The answer was given because they didn't know why. So let's just say why not, which is it's an easy out. The reason why Bonnie Bridge, I believe, became a window area, and it was before then, it still is. I'm absolutely certain of that, because the same reason that the Skinwalker Ranch is a window area, and there are window areas all over the world, and they share the same demographic principle, the same demographic. They're built on magnetic anomalies. The geology is magnetic underneath them, okay? Now, the US government knows this. They know that UFOs and other forms of paranormal phenomena as well, I may add, not just UFOs, will congregate in areas where there is a magnetic undercurrent under the ground, okay? That the geology is magnetic, it's geomagnetic, in other words. Now, they've also found that out in deep space, there are other points. Now, NASA even calls them portals, calls them doorways. The correct name for them that was given is X points. Now, these things exist where the Earth's magnetic field bumps against the sun's magnetic field, and it creates these portals, if you like, magnetic hotspots. You know, but they can last from a few seconds to a microsecond, gone, in and out, gone. But the thing is that NASA actually launched what's called the MMS project, which was to do with the Earth's magnetosphere, to actually monitor these, because it knows they exist. But why they would call them portals is not, well, maybe it's a hint, shall we say. But don't forget that where there's any sun with planets round about it, and there was similar construction, geological construction of the Earth, where they both get magnetic fields, these things will exist all over the universe. So I suggest that these spacecraft are using these portals to jump around the universe, because because they're bound to have the technology that can use them. And if NASA's saying that they're portals, they wouldn't say that for nothing. So they must know that there's something going on there, and they're certainly monitoring them. But Bonnie Bridge happened purely because it's on a geomagnetic hotspot, and it's a negative hotspot of that, I might add, and that is why. And it's been that way for centuries, and it'll be that way for centuries after. And the only reason that was not seen before the 1990s because nobody noticed. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's still going on because people have stopped looking.
Absolutely, that's a great answer, and I can kind of echo that when people might say something like, "Why Bempton? Why Spayton?"
Yeah.
Because they've got somebody who's invested so much time and energy, like myself.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Finding this information, studying these places at ridiculous hours, looking for this stuff. Because, like you've just said, all this stuff were happening at Bonnie Bridge long before it became highlighted.
Oh yeah.
And it's been happening in these locations around where I live long before I started looking.
Sure.
So when you've got, and I do realise there's quite a lot of people now. I'm just becoming aware of it, if I'm being truthful. Not recent few weeks, from Bridlington, Bempton, and surrounding areas, actually watching these live streams.
Yep.
Because I've getting people talking to me a lot, complete strangers, and obviously they've got not a vested interest, but an interesting subject. But to the ones that are watching and think it's, for want of a better word, a load of rubbish, all the stuff that I'm talking about and researching, and I'm not plugging a book here because I could do that every day. No, but the point is, there's 4 books containing hundreds and hundreds of first-hand accounts from your neighbours, from your relatives, all who've seen and experienced things of an unexplained nature. So it's not me saying this, I'm just relaying other people's stories, just like you're doing in many instances, Brian. Why Bonnie Bridge? Why any of these locations? Absolutely great answer. And we can move on from Bonnybridge if you like. And just briefly, I know you've not got any in-depth knowledge of the Calvin UFO images, but what are your views on this image that's been in press a few months ago?
Well, as the editor of the Phenomena magazine, I get a lot of stuff sent to me. Now, I'm not going to name a name here because the guy has asked me to keep this confidential.
Okay.
But this guy claims to have concrete proof that NASA is well aware that ET is out there and that ET is interacting with the satellites and stuff that's out in space. Because, again, I'm giving no names whatsoever, but the guy sent me these photographs of what looks like a humanoid ET standing crouched on a satellite. Seriously. And he sent me this image. Now, I know the guy has no training as such in graphic design. That's not what he does. But he sent me these images, and I went and looked at them and went, whoa, yeah, well, what we got here? So I'm attempting to find out just how valid these things are, because the other thing is that the Soyuz 7 spacecraft, the Russian Soyuz 7, two crews, or one crew in particular, claimed to have seen what they called angels outside the spacecraft. Now, these things are 30 or 40 feet high. They were humanoid. They're like halos around their heads and like wings, for one of them. But they were 30 or 40 feet high. Now, they told ground control, the Russian version in Baikonur, whatever it happened to be, about this. And they said, no, you haven't. That's utter nonsense. No, you haven't. Forget it. But they said, we've seen them, and we've all seen them. So what they did was they sent up another crew who went on board the spacecraft, and they saw them, right? And so the Russian authorities brought both crews down to the ground, carried out psych evaluations on them medically, and they found they were perfectly sane and rational. Now, they told them to can it. Don't say any more about this. Just forget it, which they did. And they kept it pretty close to their chest. But then apparently somebody in NASA got to hear about it, and they got in contact and said, yeah, we've been seeing these things as well. So what they are, I've no idea, but it seems to bear out what this guy who sent me these photographs was saying, because these things that he sent me look a whole lot like what they were getting described. Very strange.
It's almost biblical what they're claiming to have seen then.
Yeah,
if they're describing them as angels.
Yeah.
So are angels aliens? Or what we would term aliens, or vice versa? It's fascinating. That,
of course it is, yeah.
And that is documented, Brian, isn't it? I've heard about that before.
Well, the Soyuz 7 one. Google it again. Like I say, there's nothing I'm telling you that can't be Googled and checked. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. So, the Vatican.
Yeah.
What, I don't think you've got time to even cover this, but what information do you think they hold in their vast archive? Because we know they've got an absolute avid interest in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, don't forget that the Vatican has two big. They've got a couple of observatories, and they keep a good eye on what's happening out there. But that's beside the point. As far as what's in the secret archive is, you'll never really know, because there's enough information there to bring down the Catholic Church and Christianity with it, I think. Okay, but as to the actual artifacts that are stored in there, some of them you go, well, maybe, and some of them you say, well, wait a minute. But one of the best known ones is the bones of St. Peter, because St. Peter was supposed to have been given the charge by Christ to found a church. Okay, so he in effect founded the Catholic Church. So I think there's 7 fragments of bone. They're so old that they can't even be identified by DNA. But they are supposedly the bones of St. Peter. This was recognised by a fairly recent pope, can't remember which one, in the last 30 years or so. And they are there, these bones of St. Peter. Also, supposedly the real third secret of Fatima is there. Now, as you know, when was it Bernadette Suberius was given? That was Fatima, wasn't it? Was that Bernadette? I can't actually.
What you on that, Brian?
Yeah, 100%. I can't. I'm not too sure, but was one of these sort of sightings of the Virgin Mary when they were given at Fatima, obviously in Portugal. But they were given these 3 secrets. The first 2 were released because they were relatively innocuous, but the third one they were a bit iffy about releasing it. Well, eventually they did. And what they released wasn't too good, but at least it was redeemable. shall we say. But it is written that the real third secret of Fatima was never released, okay? Because I think it foretells the downfall of the Catholic Church, the downfall of humanity, and possibly the end of the human race, I think, is what the third secret of Fatima about, and it's supposed to be there. Other things that are supposed to be in the secret archives are grimoires, books of spells, especially the grimoire of Pope Honorius III, which is supposedly the most evil book ever written. It contains spells and conjurations for conjuring up demons, even Satan himself. Because don't forget that a Catholic priest back in the day, I'm going back, back in the Middle Ages and before, they were immensely powerful people, mainly because they were only people that were actually educated. They could read and write, basically, because the rest of the population couldn't. But the thing is that they were thought that if they could commune with angels and God and saints and all the rest of it, they could also control demons and imps of hell and all the rest of it, which is why they had this unique position. But this grimoire of Pope Honorius III is the most evil book of magic ever written. That's one of the things. But another thing that's supposed to be down there is actually Satan himself is supposed to be locked away in there, whether it's the corpse or the remains or the physical essence of Satan himself is supposed to be locked in some place within the secret archives. But there's another thing which is a bit more odd, and again you can Google this. It's a thing called a chronovisor, which is time viewer, if you want to translate it that way. Google this thing. It looks like a small pedestal with a TV set sitting on top of it. Basically, is what it looks like. And apparently, this was created by a Father Emeti, who was also a physicist and a particle physicist. They created this thing for looking back in time, and supposedly they saw the crucifixion of Christ and all the rest of it. But again, that's one of these things where you're into the old, not so sure about that one. But another thing which is more interesting to us is absolute proof of extraterrestrial life. Now, what that actually means, I have no idea. I don't know. But they apparently this lies down in the secret archives of the Vatican is absolute proof of the existence of extraterrestrials, which may or may not be a fact. It wouldn't surprise me if it was. But don't forget that these secret archives, your chance of getting in there is about as much of a snowball's chance of existing in hell, quite frankly, because even if you did get in, and people do get in, but they are watched every second of the time to make sure they've got to be very specific what they're looking for. They're not allowed to go in and rummage. They just have a look there. They've got to know specifically what they're looking for, and it will be brought to them. Specifically that, and nothing else.
I'm probably not got an answer, but how far back do these archives go? How long have they been searching for these answers?
Since the formation, certainly the formation of the Vatican, but long before then, I would say since not long after the actual foundation of the formation of the Catholic Church itself, they've been gathering all, because a lot of stuff. I mean, there were a lot of stuff before then, which would be gathered into the archive as well, which pre-existed the Catholic Church itself, right? Ancient sacred writings and so forth, I would imagine.
There's a few ways of looking at it, Brian, in my idea, because is it to protect the religion that they're not showing people and not revealing this stuff, because some of it would involve the breakdown of their belief system? Exactly.
That's why I think the really important stuff, as far as they're concerned, is the documentation that might just bring down the Catholic Church itself and the whole of Christianity with it, because it might actually reveal what Christ actually was. Was Christ an ET? Who's to say he wasn't? He certainly has the attributes to be one. Put it that way.
Yeah, and there's a lot of sort of references, as you will know, in many religious books that kind of lead us to look into the stars when we read about what people have seen throughout time.
Yeah.
Fascinating, Brian.
Yeah.
How are you for time, Brian?
A 1:15. I'll need to call it a day, buddy.
Okay, so would you like to tell people where they can do more research on Brian Allan, read about him, obtain your books?
Well, the first thing they might care to do is have a look at Phenomena magazine, because it's a free monthly publication. It's one of the best looking magazines on the circuit. I swear, I'm not just kidding you on. It's one of the best looking, best designed magazines of its kind anywhere on the net. It's www.phenomenamagazine.co.uk will take to the website. If you want to look into my background, rather than give you my website, the easiest thing to do is just type in Brian Allan UFO or Brian Allan Paranormal, and you'll get me, because I'm dotted all over the place, in more places than I want to be, actually, but I tend to crop up all over the place.
And your books are available via Amazon?
Well, the most recent book, which is, as I say, Book of Secrets, Aliens, Ghosts and Ancient Mysteries, is available on Amazon. And the previous book that I wrote with Barry Fitzgerald, which I've just forgot, you wouldn't, I've just forgot. Oh, what's it? In fact, it's over here. I'll tell you in a minute what it is.
Yeah, no worries. It's all good.
And the last book that I wrote with Barry Fitzgerald is called The Deceptions of Gods and Men. It just shows you I'm getting old. I just forgot, and it just went blank.
I don't know where I'm going to be then when I'm your age, because I forget everything now.
Well, I'm nearly 80. The Deception of Gods and Men, that was a book written about the creatures from the void, if you want to put it that way. Things that exist in the void, and they want to get to us all the time, because we're the only vessels that can actually contain them, because they need a machine, a flesh machine like us, to exist,
live through. Yeah.
And we think in the book, and I co-wrote this with Barry in this particular chapter about artificial intelligence. I think what they want us to do is to create some form of artificial intelligence where they can actually subvert us altogether and actually exist within an artificial intelligence permanently on their side of reality. But these things have always been here, and trust me, they don't do us any favours at all.
It's a frightening thought, Brian.
Yeah.
Do you know, one last thing, then we'll let you go. If you could see just one aspect of the phenomena now, or travel somewhere to experience something, potentially, what would it be, or where would it be?
I'd like to actually get face-to-face with really face-to-face with an ET.
Okay.
That's what I'd really like to do. Ghosts, stuff like that, I've seen them. I've seen them. I know they're there, I've seen them. What they are is a different kettle of fish entirely. I mean, is it a sort of concentrated consciousness? I don't actually know. Is it a solidified form of consciousness? Who knows? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to pretend I know, because I don't. But I'd like to encounter a real good-going ET that didn't have me staring down the barrel of a blaster at me, put it that way. I could have a conversation with an ET, yeah. I'd like that.
Well, do you know, I think we're going to have you back on when you've got a little bit more time, Brian.
Of course, yeah.
It's flown, and it's been fascinating. We're not going anywhere unless Les wants to close it up. I've still got another 15-20 minutes to go. Thank you, Brian.
Guys, listen, you're more than welcome, and anytime you want me back, give us a shout. For you, Paul, I've always got time, and you too, Les.
Thank you.
I've got to thank everybody for coming in the chat tonight, and it's been a great show with Brian earlier on. Fortunately, he's got to go now, so I'm going to reconfigure some screens when Brian logs off. And thanks for the super chat, I think, from Lee Roscoe. Always appreciated, Lee. Thank you very much. And there we are. Brian's gone. I can figure out what's going on here. So just bear with me while I try and get Paul on the screen. Just bear with me, guys. We are trying. Technical issues tonight, as you know.
Are we good to go? Can people hear me?
We had no pictures earlier on. Let's have a look. Trying to get Paul on the screen here. There we go, Paul. You can take it away.
Thank you. We're in the room. Yeah. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed listening to Brian. I mean, I think agree or disagree, the guy's a wealth of knowledge, and I like what he's got to say. I don't agree on everything, but I'm sure he doesn't agree with half of what I say. But one thing's for sure, he's really done his time and looked into everything in great detail. He's a great guy to talk to. So any more questions regarding our conversation with Brian, or want some questions aimed at me, go for it. And I spoke a few weeks ago about that strange case of the sheep that, at Flixton, the driver had seen just literally go sideways and into the woods. And I said I'd visit area. Well, I have visited, and I have been in those woods now. I've managed to get in, and there's no sign of any carcass, even though it's a few weeks ago. And people be saying, well, it'd be gone now. People, if something had been consumed in that wood, you would still see signs. So I don't know. But a few people asked me if I would get in, and I've up until, well, just recently, I've just not had a chance, but I have now, and nothing. And I received an interesting story today from a guy called David Kirk. He's allowed me to use his name, and it's not particularly terrifying, but it's nonetheless fascinating. It'll not take that long. And David says that as a little boy, back in 1996, his mum and dad owned a caravan on North Bay Leisure Park in Bridlington, caravan site. So we're going back to 1996, and he'd been listening to things of a paranormal nature. I don't think he's searching for answers, but what he saw sort of has just stuck with him. So he ended up listening to a few podcasts, and my name came up, and he started listening. He thought, well, from Bridlington, I'll give Paul this email, an email or a message, and I'll tell him what I saw. He said, this particular day, sunny day, holiday time, he'd been playing with his friends, and he went back to his mum and dad's caravan, and the door's locked. So he goes round to the front, big bay window. We can all picture caravans. Nothing much has changed. Says, and he peers inside this caravan, and there's a gas fire midpoint in caravan. I'm not sure whether he said right or left, but we'll say on left. And there's a dog stood outside at gas fire, but it's almost transparent, but he can see the dog. And he can't believe what he's looking at. He's only 10, 11 years old. He's pressed his face up to glass, and this thing's looking at him. So it's just a little dog. You know, when he told me he got this story, and I'm actually thinking to myself, oh, I've got another cryptid sighting here. But it didn't disappoint me. It was great to hear this. He said, and he doesn't know how it happened, but within a second, this dog had moved from the fire and was then, I will assume, up on this sofa that they have round the caravan, at the window, literally 5 mil of glass between his face and the dog's face. And it's barking its head off, this transparent dog, but he can't hear a thing, but he can see it barking. And then the moment's gone, it's ended. But it's stuck with him all his life. And I just found that quite fascinating. So we're not talking UFOs, we're not talking cryptids, but we're talking an unusual one, this ghost dog. You know, I mean, I don't know what other people think about things like that. The caravan was second-hand. So what do we think? Do we think that perhaps it is the ghost of a dog that used to visit that caravan with its previous owners? Or just some quirky anomaly that happened? You know, I think about the time that I were walking across Old Dennerby to the shops at Mexborough with my mum. We were going to Hillard's. If anybody's old enough to remember Hillard's, it's showing me age, aren't I? So, but the blacksmith shop on Church Street, they're all boarded up. Absolutely owned by a guy called Charlie Shaw. I know that because my dad used to work for him years before. He had a garage for motor vehicles, but he owned this disused blacksmith shop, and they had some stones stuck out from the side of it. I assume where farrier would lift horses' legs up and do the shoeing the horses, you know, work on them. And I used to climb on these stones, and my mum would be miles in front of me, and she'd be shouting me to come, but it were boarded up, but there were part of it broken at the bottom. And on this particular day, I'm looking into the blacksmith shop, and there's a kiln glowing. It's boarded up, it's empty. There's a kiln. See it glowing. There's a green leather settee there, which don't make any sense at all. Other than that, it's empty, apart from an old lady stood, I don't know, stood between it or just to the back of it. Little old lady with white hair. And she walks up to the glass, and I'm shouting my mum. She's telling me to come, and I'm shouting my mum, come, you know. And I'm fascinated. And there's this little pane of glass that I can just look in through. And she came up to the glass, and she's looking at me and smiling. I can picture her now. She's got wire-rimmed glasses on, grey dress. If it were a ghost, then it were a ghost that had got some kind of, I don't know, it's an awareness that I was there and I was aware of it. In the end, I had to go. But all I could think of coming back with my mum, jumped on the stones, looked, it's empty. There's no kiln, there's no leather sofa. The place is empty. It were a roof that were those old stone flags. So the bits of light pouring into it in odd places. That's why I could see inside it. But just, it kind of, I likened that story to what the guy told me this morning. And I find them quirky little things fascinating. And have we any questions, Les?
Well, I'll just continue with that a little bit and probably liken that to what Brian was talking about in would it be building stone recorder type of thing?
Yeah, well,
you know, where you've got these memories projected, but we can actually see them as humans, and because they are projected in some kind of weird way.
Yeah, you could be right. There's certain aspects of it that don't seem to make sense to me, though. The leather sofa. I mean, the kiln that wasn't there when I looked again. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're not supposed to understand. Just before we just move on to a few other bits. In next few weeks, people, Don Lodge is going to kindly host an open forum for us on via Zoom link, and he's going to send the links out, which we'll put onto the Truth Proof page, and Les will post them up on his, and I'll do the same. So anybody that wants to grab these links, I don't know how it works, people, so I sound a bit stupid here, but you can join a huge Zoom chat, which Don will moderate, and Les will be sat in chat. We'll get Chris writing, we'll get as many people as we can, and you guys, if we can get you in. Please don't fall out with us if you don't manage to get in it, but just indicate how many people would be interested, just so Don's got an idea as well. And we'll go from that, and it'll be good for Les because he'll be sat at the other side of the table for once. And yeah, all good.
And yeah, and not running the tech.
Yeah.
So how many can he get on the Zoom call, Paul? Then?
Well, I think he said like there's no limit to it, but I assume there would be, because I know in the chat we've had in past sometimes 150, 200 people in chat, so that would be a bit hard to manage. But and if Don's listening now, he might jump in and say, I know you were on earlier, but I shall speak to him tomorrow, and yeah, I think it'll be good. We just get an indication. So yeah.
Well, I'll just have a look through the questions here then, Paul.
Okay.
And I've got to thank Lee Roscoe again for the super chat tonight, Lee. As ever, great donation, and thanks a lot. And everybody who's come onto the stream, thanks for bearing with us through all the technical issues that we had earlier for no pictures, and then we got kind of some kind of picture. And I've got a question, Alex Thompson. Paul, if it's okay, elaborate on some strange animal droppings you came across in the woods. Did you?
No. I'm not absolutely certain now. It could be what I found in Danes Dyke. I found some droppings and there'd been a scratching, like a cat would do it. They dig an hole and bury, and these weren't buried, but they'd definitely been scooped out, and there were droppings in the wood. Now it sounds a weird thing to be talking about, people, but yeah, he's asked it, and yeah. And it stunk vile, and I think it was from a big cat, if that's what you're on about, Alex. And I'm sorry if it's something else, because there's that much stuff swimming about in my head.
Yeah, Patricia Adams Wright is saying it's no, not a stone tape. What we're talking about earlier, that's not sentient. It's only a replay.
if it's only a replay, then Pat, and I'm once again, I know what you're referring to, but this is what I was trying to get at with Brian. That I'm talking now. You guys are typing, and you're sort of putting your views across, putting the questions to me. That's involving brain matter. We know that nobody can open up the body and take out the soul, but we know that there's something that exists. But it's for me, its coexistence seems to be with the brain or with the body. So when we pass, we've still got this awareness. It's me. I don't get it. How do we still have that? It implies that there is something other. Or is it something? Is it a trickster? Is it something playing with us that's making us believe that we're seeing deceased people, and I don't know, getting some kind of kicks and thrills from interacting with us? I don't know. There's so many permutations and variants. It's hard to know.
Lee Roscoe is asking, what are you going to do with the Flixton interview, Paul? Any ideas?
The Flixton interview. Oh, and I take it you mean in the Sheep, the guy that I interviewed who saw this strange spiriting away of the sheep. I've filmed him. I'd like to speak to him again, and under better circumstances. Let's just go into the heart of a brilliant witness. This guy travelled from Leeds to spend 30 minutes telling me a story. He'd only been there the day before and actually had this experience and seen it, and then he came back through to tell me. So he's worth a lot more of my time. And just a 10-minute interview at the side of the road showing me where this had happened. Obviously we want to be on location, but I think it needs a lot more time devoting to it, even though what he saw literally took seconds from start to finish. And nevertheless, it's an interesting one, and in a place where strange things happen. Do you know, I've got a report up there of a dog walker seeing a light travelling through the trees and chasing the light, and it's dripping light. And he's trying to touch these things. He didn't. So, you know, there's just so many things reported in these areas. And that's what I say to the people who sit probably listening to Paul Sinclair yarn on with just a mild interest and just thinking, let's just see what this guy's got to say. Just remember that there's 4 books packed with hundreds of people just like you who've seen and experienced something off the scale of normal. And they've come to me with these stories and I've documented them. So it's not, I might be talking about them, but I've not experienced them. I've experienced a lot myself. That's why I've written book 5. But the first 4 books are for you guys. Any more questions, Les?
Yeah, I got one from Blue Shift. Let's have a look.
Rob, I think that's Rob. Yeah. Good to hear you.
Yeah, I see it's 9 years since Simon Hodgson Greaves went missing at Bempton. Have people ever said they feel drawn to the place?
It's hard to say, you know, and I think everybody knows what I feel about the missing people, because it's so delicate. You know, I think we've really got to be careful and not treat it as entertainment like a lot of researchers do. You know, if that's what they want to call themselves, or what I wanted to call myself, because it might be interesting to put a podcast on and listen to people going on about this person went missing and he did this and he did that and that's his last known whereabouts and these dogs traced it into this spot, and then they're just looking at the sky. And it's probably true. I'm not saying it's not true, but I find it really difficult talking about them. Do people go missing at Bempton and take their own lives? Yes. Or Bempton and the surrounding areas, should we say. But is there a concentration of people that have gone missing from that area and the surrounding areas that are unusual and probably not gone missing due to losing their own lives? I believe there's something other going on, something else. And it doesn't have to be supernatural. It doesn't have to be paranormal. But the guy that's just been mentioned, let's not forget that in 38 days, and this is something that the police have never picked up on, and I don't mind saying this, 4 people went missing. Not from that immediate area, 2 from that immediate area, 1 15 miles away and 1 25 miles away, all on East Yorkshire coast, East and North Yorkshire coast. There were one in Whitby. There were one at Hundale Point, which is 15 miles away, where I'm going as the crow flies, and there were two from the same place in 38 days. That's it. It's interesting, and it's frightening as well when if you look at it like that. And that's where I would be if I were looking into this with some kind of criminal mind, you know. But there's no way. I never want anybody to think that I think that is entertainment. I talk about the UFO sightings, I talk about the encounters, I talk about the cryptid sightings, missing people. That's someone's son, that's someone's husband or wife, and we always have to be mindful of that.
Can these coastal disappearances, can they actually be attributed to, I'm trying to pick my words here, normal means of disappearing? You know where I'm going with that one.
Well, I'm taking it. What you're saying is, could somebody have taken their own life? Well, of course, we had a doubt that, and that happens, and we'll never be in a position to say that's not what happened. But usually, Les, I mean, because you know, I had looked into these during writing the first book. Usually, when somebody's going to do something like that, they've got a history of that kind of thing. We know not in all instances, or you know, or there's been a pattern, or something traumatic's happened, or it's no good going into details of what could have happened, but we all know the type of situations, and that's why we do find that somebody's lost their life in locations like this. And usually then those unfortunate people are retrieved. The sea usually gives up its dead eventually. It's a bit macabre, a bit grim, people, in it, but in these cases, just vanished, just gone off the face of the earth. But I think it's important to stress that I'm not necessarily saying it's anything to do with anything of a paranormal nature, because I'd be stupid if I said that, and I haven't a clue anyway.
Okay, for those just joining the stream, can you tell people who you are? And I haven't got your website name on the screen, so tell them the website name and what they can do when they get there, Paul.
I'll tell them who I am first. My name is Paul Sinclair. No, and the website's truthproof.uk. And as we've said before, it's the only place at the moment where you can get the paperbacks. Anybody interested in a physical copy of the book, get it via the website. We are going to introduce them back to Amazon and let Amazon do that part of it. But I will still be selling them through the website as well. I'll just not be distributing them myself physically through Amazon. So that's the way they're going to go shortly. And the Kindle versions of the books, obviously, they're all obtainable through Amazon. And I think it's brilliant, you know, because those books are all in their own, in the sort of Amazon top 100s within their genres. And I'm only selling Kindles, and they're sort of competing against paperbacks and Kindles. So yeah, I'm pleased with the books. And night people, I can just see it sort of drifting about in the background, and yeah, it's great. You know, I never thought I'd write a book. And there you go. If I can write a book, anybody can.
Okay, and also for people just joining, me and you have been involved in a 3-year-long film, and the film is called Wolf Lands. If you want to tell people a little bit about that film and where the progress is so far with it. Yeah,
we're absolutely thrilled to bits, Les, aren't we? Because we've probably spent, like you said, at least 18 months telling you guys that Wolf Lands is nearly there, and we've just kept polishing, and it's now out of our hands. And Mick Park's got Wolf Lands now, and Nick, his partner who he works with, and Jessica, my daughter, and her husband Nick, they're doing the harmonies and the vocals. Between them 4 people, the music's been added to the film, and I'm sure it's going to be well worth the wait. I mean, it's been hard. It's been a tough road, because we've not just sat behind a keyboard, sort of writing what we want to put into the film and then talking to people, I don't know, in a cafe about what it was, and Les has done some kind of recreation that's going to flash back to it. We've actually been in the locations with the witnesses. stood in their shoes, slept overnight. We drove up there, we've not slept. Spent full nights there without sleeping. It's pointless going to these locations, even if you think you're going to get anything out of it as regards a taste of what they felt. If you're going to sleep through it, you may as well stay at home. So we've done that in various places. Some of the places we've never changed locations, but some of the places, due to accessibility, we've been on the fringes of them. And I don't mean we've been in some kind of park. We've been deep in forests, but we've been in places where we know we've got permissions. But it's been a long, hard road, and one that's been a learning curve for me. You know, I did Bringing Down the Light with Chris, and I will be doing some more work with Chris, just like I'll be doing some more with Les, hopefully. And yeah, I couldn't have made Wolflands with anybody else, I don't think, because Les has given me the time to write what I want to write, sort of basically do what I want to do, and he's done the editing, and it's worked. We've had some good arguments as well, and during process, and who doesn't?
Oh yes. Well, I don't think any collaboration on that length of time doesn't come away with any arguments, Paul. So that can only be good in my book, I think.
Well, we're still talking, aren't we? So there you go. That's how.
You're still on my Christmas.
Yeah.
You're still on my Christmas card list.
Yeah.
And,
so where are we going now then, Les?
Well, either this machine, this tablet in front of me is packed up, or Sky's not sent many more questions through. I've got a, what was it here? I don't know who this is from. Probably from Sky. Tell Don in private that I keep a copy of chat. I don't think I'm supposed to read this out.
No, but we know what that's for, because Don will be wanting to know who's interested and the amount of people that will go on to the open forum that we're going to do in a few weeks' time. And if you want to indicate people, just as a rough straw guide, what day would suit you? Because obviously it's got to suit Don as well, but and then we'll get it set up, and I'm sure it'll be interesting. It'd be good to get a bit of interactive chat going, won't it? And all good.
Well, there's a suggestion here from Anthony Hudson. I don't know if he's put the right name on here, but I'll read it out anyway. Paul, have you considered getting Thinner Thunker on the show? In my honest opinion, the best Bigfoot researcher about at the moment. Who's that?
I don't know, and I'm not laughing at the guy who said the question, but Paul, have you considered getting thinner? Yes, I have. Obviously I like my food too much, but no, if you want to, on a serious note, if you want to send Les or send me some details where we can contact this guy, we'll definitely sound him out. And yeah, because guests are always a struggle, and I'll tell you why guests are a struggle, because it's 24/7 doing other things, and there's a lot of people doing podcasts, so literally that's all they do. And so anybody's got suggestions for guests, anybody knows anybody, point them in our direction. If they're interesting, we will definitely like to speak to them.
Yeah, and because we've been on the air for most of the year, for the last 2.5 years, it is difficult finding some of the guests where we're not seeing the same guests on, even though we do like to invite some of the guests back again, because obviously they've got further stories to tell us, haven't they, and further accounts. So we always have them back, or where we don't get quite through all what we've got wrote down for that broadcast.
I'm not sure if I told anybody about. I haven't got the exact dates in front of me, but I've called it the hooded figure at Fraysthorpe. And if I did, then forgive me, because because I'm obviously going to speak about it again. I was told about it a few weeks ago, and it were a man and woman travelling home after having a holiday in Bridlington. Nice sunny afternoon, and as they're just passing the Fraysthorpe junction, and he just catches a glimpse. There's a car in front of him, a good distance away, but he just catches the sight of a very tall, what he thinks is a female, stood at the side of the road with a hooded coat on, black hooded coat, and 2 children. And before he realizes what's happening, the hooded female has started crossing the road between the two cars and disappears into the edge. He doesn't know how she got across the road that fast. And when he looked for the children, what he perceived were children, they'd gone. Another quirky story from a place where, like one of these concentrated hotspots where strange things happen. When I looked into what we've called the Wilsthorpe incident, and Wilsthorpe will be about a mile down the road from Fraysthorpe, all on the same stretch of coast, we had a police officer that saw, travelling along that road one night, just past the Fraysthorpe junction, where this guy's seen this hooded figure, and he doesn't know if it were a girl, and the car slowed down to a stop. He stopped to assist, and allegedly, and I spoke to the police officer, a triangle lifts above the hedges, the same hedges, and I'm not going to say exact same place, but the same hedges where this female ran across the road and went into. But the triangle lifts and goes out to sea. All of that happening, but we've got these concentrated hotspots or zones. And have we any more questions? Because I think I saw some capital letters come up, Les, that disappeared.
Tino is asking, and welcome to the show, Tino. Paul, has there been any activity around Whitby Church and the graveyard up on the cliff? Have you any reports from that, Paul?
No, I've got reports of UFO activity off the coast of Whitby, but I've not got. No, I'm sure there is reports from the graveyard around Whitby. I tell you what's interesting. While we were working on Wolflands, stuff that we haven't included because it weren't necessary, and it's of no great revelation, but the inspiration for Bram Stoker's visit to Whitby, when he was said to arrive on the shores of the United Kingdom, Dracula, was the phantom black hounds that are reported in folklore. The Hound of Dracula is said or thought to be the inspiration for the Hound of Dracula, are the black phantom hounds, the huge hounds with glowing eyes that through folklore are said to haunt this coastline. The very same hounds with huge glowing eyes that we've actually documented in Wolflands. We've not copied, by the way, people, because we've not referenced any of that, because we've got his own witnesses that claim to have seen these unusual things. Just like the Hound of the Baskervilles is said to have been inspired by the Guy Trash, the huge phantom hound that is said to haunt the moors of Gothland. How incredible that it's literally within sight of where the gamekeeper saw this strange creature that we've documented in Wolflands. When I mean say in sight, you can look across the moors and see Gothland. You can nearly see Fylingdales, but you have to walk a little bit further. So I find it fascinating. It's all there.
Baby with a laser is asking, a suggestion really. It would be nice to interview ordinary experiences on the show sometime. Any plans for this?
Why not? If there's people within the chat who, bearing in mind, without sounding rude to anybody, it would be if we've got people within the chat who've got some fabulous experiences to share, and I know there will be. If you think that you can talk to us for 30 minutes about your experience or experiences, get in touch. Let's give it a go.
Patricia Adams Wright is saying, I'd love a live on a Tuesday with you on a Thursday. That would really break up the week.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether Les has got the energy to do that all the time, and myself included. Perhaps if we did it an hour Thursday, an hour Tuesday, it might be better. But what I tend to do, I'll look at the weather and I do like to go out. I mean, I think myself and Bob Brown, once again, we've been up at Bempton every night. Have we seen anything? Zilch. Absolutely nothing. Have we seen anything for months? No. I went up once on my own, saw them twice, the day after there'd been the sighting of 7 on the cliff tops. But we're never going to see anything if we don't put ourselves in them locations. And I realise I just sound like a broken record, but it's the truth.
Valiant Looney is suggesting Nathan Rio would be a good guest. I don't know who Nathan Rio is, Paul. Do you know?
I don't, but if you want to fire some of these things at us, just either via email, or if you use Facebook, put it into Facebook Messenger, and or if you know these people, if you've actually, I don't know, exchange a bit of correspondence with them, reach out to them. It would help us. We'd appreciate it.
Thunder 65, Paul, are the animal mutilations still going on in your area?
Not that I know of, and I think I would get told, even if I wasn't visiting the affected areas. There are a few people that would inform me if things were happening, and so no, I don't think so. It's strange how these things seem concentrated. I mean, that lasted. I found out about it midway through, so it had been going on since mid 2016, but I got to it in 2017, and it petered out about very early 2019, and it were prolific. It were a strange situation, but you'd not just got the animal mutilations, you'd got the robotic voice chatter that not just I myself were hearing. I heard it once, that people in the surrounding area had heard. People were hearing up on the cliff tops at Bempton. I spoke to somebody yesterday. I'm hoping to speak to them tomorrow as well, and they heard the robotic chatter at Bempton, and that's what I want to speak to them about, and because it fascinates me that there's so many people heard this strange disjointed chatter in their ears while they're up in these areas. And it's not something that you're hearing from a fairground that might be carried on the wind, if that makes sense. We've all heard things like that. This is just in your ear. It's really weird, and it's not unlike what the gamekeeper heard just before he saw the creature at Stape in Wolflands. He said, whilst he was walking around after this sphere of light had travelled up from his side a few days before, he was hearing robotic chatter, almost like radio chatter in his ear, and all these things go hand in hand.
Do you think some of this? It's just a loose thought here from my point of view. Do you think this robotic chatter, can it tie in with this radio frequencies that are picked up, say around Bempton, what picked up on devices?
It could very well, Les, yeah, and I'm glad you've mentioned that, because this is for Peter Masters, who's a bit of a radio and frequency, I would say, expert. He's really involved in it and building devices, and he's been up to Bempton with me. And speaking, and I keep saying Bempton as though it's the only place in the world, around the East Yorkshire coast. And we've picked up strange signals and the same frequencies, and that they're picking up in other parts of the world, in places of high strangeness. So I spoke to Peter today, and I'm glad you've said that, Les, because I'd have forgot. He asked me to ask the question to the people, anybody who's visited that area, have you got any evidence of your devices, phones, cameras, electrical items failing? Because, well, he'd like to know, so we'd like to know, basically. And yeah, and once again, what can induce the feelings of extreme fear? Because that happens around those areas as well. And it's not just because you're in a dark place and you're getting a little bit twitchy. There's a proper descent into fear. And I might go up there 4 or 5 times a week. It's not happened to me once. It's happened to me once when I was Steve Ashbridge. Steve never felt it. I did. I was frightened to death, and there's a few people felt it, and I don't know what came over me. So I'd like to hear people's experiences, not necessarily on East and North Yorkshire coast. Let's throw it wider, and let's see whether when they're feeling these things, whether anything strange has happened before or after. Does the place have a history of, a rich history of paranormal activity?
Yes, I was going to say something there, it left my head. And have you, well, it's 2 questions, I think. The first one is, and you just touched on it there, have you any ideas of expanding your research into other areas? I know you've just touched on it, Paul.
I think it's a must. Go on, Les, sorry.
Yeah, because there is a lot of tie-ins, isn't there, Paul, with some of the anomalies and
Yeah, I
experiences that
think
you've
it's a
got.
must, and it's got to stage. And a good friend who's been in contact with me for years now actually suggested. He said, you know, although there's still an abundance of information coming out of these areas, just expanding to other places. And he's right. You know, I've got some cryptid sightings from Iceland and Sweden, which are fascinating. And we know that these things are happening in other locations, but I've spent that much time with my head buried around East and North Yorkshire, and I need to be looking further afield, like you said, to tie these things together, get different. You know, it might be geology at land that's same in a lot of these places. You know, I don't know. All I do know is, yes, I've got to sort of start widening the net.
And just to pick up on a question that I did forget before that one to ask, was this radio chatter, these frequencies. Now everybody knows, or who listens to you regular, know that there are RAF bases active and disused RAF bases around there. Do you think this has any bearing on the on this chatter like business?
Excuse me. Well, everybody knows that the former RAF base up on East Yorkshire coast there at Bempton has been disused since 1960. I think it was 1968. In that what year that they finally kind of disbanded it. I think it was put there. A lot of people will say, oh, a lot of these places are put there because the lands are really sort of quirky, spooky place, and that's why it's done. I think it was put there because it was right place to put a radar base, just like RAF Staxton Wold is 500 foot above sea level, and it's the perfect location for what they wanted. And so I don't necessarily think it's something of a paranormal hotspot that the military needed it to be. But having said that, we know that we get a lot of activity around military bases. Is it the high output of energy that's getting kicked out there? Is it that they're using different frequencies and different radio signals that's attracting this stuff? I don't know. Could be a combination of it all. It's difficult to say, isn't it? You know, I mean, before, thousands of years before, Staxton Wold were a Roman hill fort. So it's had a physical human presence there throughout time. So we've put our mark onto that land, haven't we? You know, we've put our thought into it. So I don't know. I mean, am I by looking into all of these things around this area? Am I somehow igniting the phenomena? Not me just personally, but I'm highlighting other people's accounts, and there does seem to be a lot more people coming forward. I had to laugh in the week. Myself and Bob went up there, parked up, and bit tongue in cheek, this guy, I didn't know who he were, and he's unpacking fishing tackle, and he's with another guy. I think he thought he were being clever, but it didn't really bother me. And he says, "Have you seen any werewolves in darkness?" Do you know what I mean? I walked over to him because I don't know what his accent were. Everybody laughs at my accent, and I asked him, I said, "What language is that you're talking?" And I don't know what he thought I was going to do as we get. I think he probably thought I would have walked off, shuffled off, but that's not my nature. And I said to him, "So you're going to be fishing? Are you climbing over the fence and you're fishing over 400-foot cliffs?" He went, yeah, we will be. I says, "And you think we're?" There were a little swear word come out of my mouth, and he said, "You think we're mad?" So I just walked off. But a lot of those people, a lot of those anglers have all seen and experienced things, and a lot of them will share it with me. There's others that have seen nothing, but it's interesting nevertheless. It's a quirky place.
Do you think some of those anglers what have experienced anything, some of them may not actually come back ever again, or is the draw of the fishing too great?
I think usually I wouldn't say the mob handed, but usually there's more than one lone angler. There's usually a few people up there, but when it happens, when these strange lights appear, sometimes it happens on a club night. So you'll have a team from, I don't know, Filey or somewhere along the cliff tops. They all get to see them. And it's brilliant, the reaction you get, and it's brilliant listening to how they explain them. because you'll speak to some fishermen, or one or two, and they'll say, "Oh, it's jets." I said, "Well, do you hear any planes? Do these are they flying anywhere?" No, but it's jets. You get others, it's afterburners. You get others, it's Chinese lanterns. You know, we're between 5 and 10 miles out to sea, people, and these Chinese lanterns haven't flown from anywhere. They've just switched on 3 in a row, then switched off and become 5 in a row further down coast. And you know, I find their explanations fascinating and I mean amusing. I mean, but they're not looking no further than basically what's put out there as a staple explanation by official bodies. And you know, I've spent enough time up there observing these things to know that in 90% of the time instances when these things are seen, they're not Chinese lanterns, they're not weather balloons, they're not meteorological effects. We've got something other presenting in them skies over the North Sea.
Yeah, and what I got to say here, Paul, is at this point is you said earlier, you know, there is actually some people who live in the Bempton area watch your
without a doubt, yeah.
live stream, and really, I'm thinking it would be really, really interesting if some of these people then took an interest and actually went out there and to observe.
You go out there and observe.
More observers, that's what I'm saying.
Or if you've seen something and that's why you're watching, reach out. I'll not say anybody's name if that's what's required. I find it amusing, and I won't say any names here, that there's a certain person runs a social media platform in that area who laughs every time a big cat's seen and does little mock-up scenes and things. Laughs, scoffs when UFOs are seen. Yeah, I've been contacted by someone very close to that person to tell me that that person and the one who's contacted me both observed a UFO up close and personal, something that could not be explained. Never says that when they're on the forum. I find it, it's interesting. But on that note, Les, I think I'm just about done with you guys. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble on, people, because nothing were prepared tonight, and we really didn't know how long we'd got with Brian, and I really thank him for giving us his time. So I'm just going to hand it over to Les now to wind up,
Okay.
and thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Paul. And I've got to say, Brian was a great guest on tonight, as you probably agree. If you rewound the tape and listen to what Brian had said, it was really, really interesting. He has got he's the editor of the Phenomena magazine, which, as Brian states, is one of the best-looking magazines in the UK at this moment in time. And it was great. It was an honour to speak to him. An honour to run the show for you, Paul, tonight, with all the gremlins et al. Hopefully we can get back on track next time we come on. How many more? I'll just get this question on air. I don't know how many more streams we've got left in this month, but I know we will be breaking obviously for the holidays, so there could be off air 2 or 3 weeks. But we do have some great videos to slot into that time slot if you so wish to want to check in. So good one. So on that note, Paul, I'll wish you a good night, and it's a good night from Truth Proof Towers. Good night all.
Thank you.